It's a real mind fuck when you don't believe in hell anymore, but you're afraid you might go there because you don't believe in it.
Yeah.
And, people are struggling with all this kind of confusing stuff going on, and loneliness and leaving the church and all that. And a lot of people deconstructing still have that religious impulse that they've got to do the right thing in order to get to the goal of perfection or righteousness or whatever it is. One day, though, you're going to realize you're okay.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the Medicine Podcast. This episode is brought to you by Mushy Love Latte, the best tasting mushroom elixir on planet Earth. To check it out, go to themedicine.com. I'm sitting next to my favorite human, my partner in life and love and podcasting, Chase.
What is going on, everybody? We are extra excited today. We have someone on the show that we've been following for quite some time. His work has been impacting so many and absolutely impacting our lives. And so it is with great honor that I get to welcome David Hayward, the NakedPastor. Welcome to the Medicine Podcast.
Thanks very much. I know when you say David Hayward, people are like, who's that? And
Yeah.
Pastor, and then they go, oh, him.
Yeah, in this world where we're recognizing each other by our signs and handles and everything. Yeah. I'm sure there's people listening maybe that, have been following you. We share your stuff on our stories all the time. And, they usually get great feedback. People like Harding and like, oh my gosh, this totally resonates. A big portion of our audience are also going through or have gone through some level of religious or dogmatic deconstruction, and they're asking these questions that we've been asking for me, about 4 to 5 years. Chase, much longer. Chase has been since birth, but this is, I think, a really important part of the individual self is asking the question of like, okay, these were the beliefs that were handed to me when I was born, basically. What makes sense to me? Does this make sense? Does it resonate with me? Is what I see in the world actually match the teachings that I'm getting on Sunday? And is there overlap or is there a gap? And so we are super excited to dive into your work and your story. Before we do all that, we have one question that we ask every guest. The first question is, what do you love in your life? What aspect of your life do you love so much that you wish you could gift it to every human?
Oh man, I have so much. Just one. Okay. Maybe most people say my wife or, my family or whatever, and those are absolutely top of the list, but maybe to be a little different. What I really enjoy about my life is creativity and just being able to be creative all the time and actually being, it supports me. I'm making a living from my creativity. So that brings me a lot of joy, and to be able to do what I love and passionate about. And that I can do that full time. So that's a lot of fun. A lot of joy there.
Yeah. Well, we are grateful for your creativity as well.
Yeah. And I think too, it seems, at least observing from afar, I know we're just getting to know you, but at least observing you, it really seems like you've found that ikigai, the intersection of something you love, something you're good at, something the world needs, and something that you can make a living with. And that's, I think, what a lot of people are searching for. So I totally get that. It's a huge blessing. And if everyone in the world had that, I think that we would be living in a very different world.
Yeah, but here's the thing. People, like, too often we look at people like as if it's a snapshot, right? And when in fact it's a movie, like it's a whole long film. And it's taken me a long time and a lot of hard work to get to this place. So I think a lot of people despair that they're never going to be able to do and live by what they're passionate about, but it doesn't happen overnight. Like, you need to really want it and stick with it, and like I did, like so many others do, sticking with it, and one day I've seen it happen over and over again. It will materialize, So you're
it's so spot on. It's like we can find what we love and what we're passionate about, but it's not absent from the daily work and being passionate enough to be persistent and to be patient. So I love that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people say, what's your number one ingredient for, you being able to do what you do? And I just say, I wouldn't go away. You can't get rid of me.
Yeah.
And that's the number one ingredient. Seriously. Like, I've been doing art for my whole life. And then I started my blog, NakedPastor, in 2005. And, it took many, many years to finally decide to make the decision to take the leap to do it full time. And, and I've been sort of doing that now for more than 10 years. But yeah, it takes a while. I'm just not going away. Just keep on keeping on,
Yeah, I love that. That's a great way to put it. I want to get into your story and how you got here. But first, how did you choose the name NakedPastor? Where did that come from?
I get that all the time. I first URL I had, the first blog name was davidhayward.ca, and the CA stands for Canada. That's where I live, by the way. And that sounded boring. And then I got Church Pundit, and that sounded pretentious. And then I was just trying to think of a good name. And at that time, the Naked Chef, the Naked Archaeologist, Naked Truth, all those things were kind of popular. And I thought, I want to do a blog as a pastor. I was a pastor at the time. And I thought, I want people to see the real life of a pastor. Like, I want to pull back the curtain, let people see what really goes on in the life of pastor, what really goes on in the church, be super honest, super vulnerable, super real, super raw, and just tell the truth of what's going on. And so naked, that's what the naked means.
Yeah.
It's just being raw and real, no pretense, no adornment. And so then I don't know what I did, but I was thinking about it. And then weeks later, I got an email saying, congratulations, you won the auction for nakedpastor.com. I'm like,
great.
Oh my God, how much money? Like, I had no idea I'd entered an auction. I don't know how that happened. But I was the only one, and it was like $68 or something.
Yeah.
So,
I think it's worked out for you.
Yeah. I mean, it sticks. Yeah.
I love it. I think it attracts many who are willing to be exposed and open the door to vulnerability.
There's another word, exposed. Yeah.
Right. We know you as an incredible artist who shares profound wisdom through the medium of drawing and through humor, because so much of it's just absolutely hilarious. And we know that messages, the pictures speak 1,000 words, drawing, art, comedy can sometimes, drop insight on you almost out of the corner of your eye, bypassing these ego filters that we may have, that we may not be able to listen to directly from somebody. And so we know you as this healer in so many ways through the modalities of art and comedy, but would love to hear about your journey from, like you said, a pastor working in the ministry through and evolving into the space of becoming the naked pastor and having left the ministry. And so if you could a little bit, backfill the story a bit. How did you get into being a pastor and then the process of deconstructing?
I don't know how I became a pastor. Anyway, I grew up in a religious home, a very Christian home, and my dad was a policeman who was transferred a lot around Ontario and Canada. And so we weren't faithful to any one church or denomination. We would just go to the most convenient happening place in town, And when I was a teenager, though, we ended up Baptist. That's where I got really born again. And then we switched to Pentecostal, where I got the Holy Spirit, and then from there, I decided to go to a Pentecostal Bible college in the United States. And I went through there, got a degree in Bible and theology, met Lisa. Then we got married 2 days after graduation. And then we went to Boston, where I went to seminary. And then, long story short, I ended up in the Presbyterian Church, got ordained Presbyterian, got another master's, like an MDiv, and left after a while. I got bored with the Presbyterian Church. And the difference between Pentecostals and Presbyterians, I heard a really good analogy. It's like this: with the Pentecostals, you always feel like you're trying to put out a fire, but with the Presbyterians, you always feel like you're trying to light one. And so that was kind of my experience. And so Lisa and I kind of missed the, I don't know, the passion, I guess, of a more charismatic kind of a community, and the music and etc. So we ended up in the Vineyard Church. I don't know if you've heard about that, but if nobody out there knows what it means, it's kind of a mix between Baptist and Pentecostal, kind of evangelical theology with miracles and stuff.
Okay.
And contemporary music. And so we ended up there in a Vineyard Church. I pastored a Vineyard Church until 2010, when I decided I couldn't stay anymore in the church. I felt it was constricting my growth, and I decided to leave the ministry, like, overnight. And terrifying moment. But I left. And decided I was going to see if I could make Naked Pastor a full-time gig, because I'd been doing it now for 5 years, and so I decided to put all my effort into it, and as well as other things like books. I have an online community called The Lasting Supper, art, all kinds of things, and you know what? It worked, and fortunately, my wife's a nurse, so together, it works. And I'm doing a lot better than I was at the beginning, but and so when I left the ministry in 2010, that I'd already been deconstructing for a long time theologically, but for us, what the real challenge came when we had to deconstruct from the church and from the ministry, and that was really, really hard. We'd been deconstructing sort of together for decades, and kind of like a slow glacial melt, but leaving the church was like overnight. And I lost my sense of purpose in life. I lost my vocation. We lost our friends, my salary, so many things happened at once. It was like the perfect storm that created quite a lot of crisis and trauma, and in our relationship, including, and we had a rough couple of years, and but we found our feet again, and we're doing better than ever, and putting all my effort into Naked Pastor to help others through that process.
Beautiful.
I believe there's two deconstructions. One is theological, the other is ecclesiological.
Yeah, let's get into that. I would love to unpack both of those. One, I love that I think you may have been some of the first people that I've heard use the phrase deconstruction, which is now,
I think I got it from
it's now become a very common term for people who grew up Christian and have departed in some way. Maybe defining deconstruction, and then in these buckets that you've categorized, unpacking those.
Yeah, so I was, as a Vineyard pastor, I was sent to a weekend workshop on hermeneutics, which is how to study, how to read the Bible. And we were given a bunch of textbooks to read beforehand. And a lot of them were critical of the deconstruction movement, the deconstructionist movement, which was started by Jacques Derrida in France a long time ago. It's a school of philosophy. And basically it's hard to understand. It's very deep, but it's basically, there's no such thing as objective truth in a text. Everything is questioned, because not only do we not really know the mind of the writer, the writer doesn't even know their own mind,
right?
And all the influences, and then there's the transmission of the text, and then the lens we're reading through. Like, it's impossible. And this is the topic of a lot of my cartoons. When somebody says the Bible clearly says, immediately you don't understand hermeneutics. The Bible doesn't clearly say anything. So anyway, I was supposed to read these texts on deconstruction to turn me off of it, or to warn me about it. But I became a convert. I thought, this exactly describes my spiritual process right now, where I'm questioning everything, not just theology, but where we get our theology from, and how it's packaged and how it's custom made, and how we all grow up in communities that foster that and nurture that and encourage that and promote it and marshal it, everything. And so I was questioning everything, my theology, the Bible, inspiration, the existence of even God, the divinity of Jesus, even the existence of a historical Jesus, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh yeah.
It was devastating. But I started using the term in 2008. I used the word deconstruction. I checked in my blog, and the first time I used it was in 2008. And then in 2009, somebody said, "You're starting to sound like a deconstructionist." And I thought, you know what? Okay. And so I started talking about deconstruction way back then. Like, how long ago is that? So, and yeah, deconstruction now, everybody's talking about it. But for me, deconstruction is just normal spiritual personal growth. It's not a phase. It's not some kind of a disease, like spiritual COVID or something. Like
Right.
It's just natural. It's only natural to question our beliefs, and to, like, Mimi, when you were saying, you were questioning when we question our beliefs and everything, and is that really true? Does that really match reality? That so few people have the courage to go there.
Yeah.
To say what I believe, does that actually make sense? Like, does that line up with what I actually know to be true and experience in life? Like, that's a super, super scary question to ask. So, but that's, I think, what deconstruction entails.
Yeah, I think it's one reason it's scary. Certainly there's multiple and many, but I think one reason it's scary is because in the conversation around religion, the person is thinking about the afterlife. And if I don't believe this, what is going to happen to me? And that can be a really scary place to step into, to say, you know what, I don't really believe in hell. I don't really believe in this heaven place as a physical place, or whatever the person is deconstructing, right? It is tied to the afterlife. And so much of our teaching and our teaching, meaning what we, were taught, everything is kind of driven by these concepts of heaven and hell and fear of going one place and looking forward to going to the other place. And so to step back and to start to question that, it's like, well, what does it mean? What does it mean for me in the afterlife if I don't believe this, or if I do question it?
Yeah. So that was that's like one component of the deconstruction is the theology. And you have this sort of like crisis where you start to question, wait, is there a hell? What is sin? Do I even believe in sin? This divine being named God also has a son. There seems to be contradictions all over the place in the Bible about this, or lack of clarity. And so, like, definitely for me in my story, I grew up evangelical Christian. I actually got to my Presbyterian college, and the curriculum is you're actually encouraged, whatever study, I was an accounting and a business major, but you're forced into a core curriculum at the school, which I actually find really amazing, of history of the church, religion, of major religious history across, all generally 5 or 6 major world religions, history of philosophy, psychology, sociology, and then the development of your worldview is this idea prior to, graduating as a senior. And I got into church history, religious history, philosophy, psychology, and I was like, these aren't lining up.
Yeah.
What you're suggesting to me is contradictory to what the whole idea of my upbringing looks like. And so I actually by the time I'm a senior in college, I'm like, I'm not buying this, guys. And you presented me the evidence. And so that was kind of like this theological deconstruction, which then led for me to a deconstruction of identity and community, because the orientation of how I identified myself was always through the framework and the structure of the Christian community that we came out of. And so after having changed my own perspectives on God, the divine, salvation, I'm then led into isolation, feelings of aloneness, because my who am I? These big questions, because the context with which I found myself through for 20 some years was now gone. And I'd never felt more alone in my entire life at 20, early 20s as I'm deconstructing this. So I was curious, as you broke apart deconstruction into the theology side, and then did you say Ecclesiastes or an ecclesiastical version of this?
Ecclesiological, which means church.
Okay.
Theological.
Yeah, because I saw people who were claiming to have deconstructed when what they had deconstructed from was the church. Like, so if you deconstruct theologically, I predict you're probably going to deconstruct from the church, because the church, in my opinion, generally doesn't provide a safe place for people to ask questions, serious questions. However, if you experience frustration with the church, or abuse in the church, or religious trauma, or you're fed up with its greed, ambition, hierarchy, the patriarch, those kinds of things, and you say that's it, or like a lot of people do, they're like, the church has lost its origins, it's no longer like the early church, I'm quitting, we need to return to the early days. What I observe is that people who deconstruct from the church don't necessarily deconstruct theologically.
Got it.
In fact, sometimes they're even more fundamental in their beliefs.
Sure.
Because the church needs to be pure, and we've lost our roots, and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And,
okay. Really interesting.
Yeah. So deconstructing theologically, though, if you start there, you have two choices. One is to keep your mouth shut and keep it to yourself, or if you do come out spiritually with these questions, you're either going to feel the necessity to leave, or you'll be invited to leave, right? So that's what I observe.
Do you call yourself or identify yourself as a Christian today?
I don't like labels. I don't use labels. And at this point, a lot of people are going, oh, here we go, like nailing Jello to the wall kind of thing, slippery like a snake. But I'm genuine. Like I have a saying, my home is in Christianity, but I have cottages everywhere. And I'm really comfortable with that concept of, like, I live on a river, and there's a lot of streams that connect to it. And it's still the Kennebecasis River, but there's many sources for the river, many streams, many springs, and it dumps out into the ocean, which I'm near. And I see that as sort of an analogy, a metaphor for me, for you guys, is there's many streams, and I've learned to appreciate them all. Yeah, maybe Christianity is the greater part of that river that's flowing through me, but there's tons of other streams that are flowing through me that I receive nourishment from, Judaism, Islam, the Sufis, native spirituality, atheism, science, Buddhism, Zen, we could go on and on and on.
Right.
And because I've researched and looked, because I'm interested in the truth, and not any one school of thought possesses the truth solely. And that's just my view of the world, is that there's one reality and a million interpretations of that reality. And I'm interested in every single one. And so I just consume. I'm interested because I, like so many of us, are interested in what the truth is. And I don't think it's found in any one place. It's sort of like this river that's so, mixed and rich,
Yeah.
Indeed.
God, I wish I could have talked to you when I was about 21, 22 years old. Beautiful. What for
me
you?
too. I wish I could have talked to myself when I was that old.
Yeah. It's a very isolating feeling to depart from that after having 20 some years in that framework. But there were for me, some sticking points that I could not look past any longer. And I'm curious for you, what if you had to pull a few together around, Christianity, what were some of those, whether they be contradictions or even just truths that had been identified in that space that for you, you just couldn't see past any further or enable any further being a part of that community that ultimately led to your departure?
My deconstruction began on my graduation day from seminary. I remember the moment. So I'd finished my master's, I'd finished all my papers, all my presentations, all that. And for some reason, we were down at Harvard Coop in Boston, and we were in a bookstore, and I noticed the book, and the title intrigued me. And every time I mention this, people are like following up, like, what was the name of the book? So I'm going to tell you. It's James Breach, The Silence of Jesus. And it was written a long time ago. Like I graduated in 85. So I picked it up and I read the book, and it devastated me. Because up to this point, I was a Bible person. So I got my BA in Bible and Theology. I went and studied Bible and Theology, New Testament studies at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary under Dr. Gordon Fee, one of the greatest New Testament critics. And then I was heading to University of Toronto to get my PhD in New Testament studies. And I had Greek and Hebrew and Aramaic and theological French, theological German, like all this stuff. Like I was so into the Bible. I still have my Bible from when I was a teenager, all underlined in colored crayons and everything. But this book undermined my belief in the inspiration of Scripture. All of my theology rested on that cornerstone. And this book pulled that out. And it was like the Jenga block tower, just like, and I was so devastated that I actually had my graduation robe on and everything. And I was in shock. And Lisa grabbed me by the shoulder and said, "You've got to go to your graduation ceremony." And like, that's precisely where my deconstruction began.
For someone who maybe didn't grow up in the church or as a Christian or in religion, and you mentioned inspiration, can you just explain that a little bit? Because this is such a turning point. This is such a pivotal moment in your story. What do you mean by inspiration?
So there's different levels of inspiration. One is that it's a divine book that dropped out of heaven, or what I believed at the time was that God, through the Holy Spirit, inspired men, because they are all men, inspired men to write these words. And so there's no error. There's no error theologically or in regards to faith. There might be historical stuff and all that might be questioned, but theologically and in regards of faith and life, it's without error, infallible. Okay, so that's what I believed. But this book, what this book did was it took all the sayings of Jesus, and out of all the sayings of Jesus, this research was done where it came down to there was possibly 7 sayings of Jesus that were actually authentic. And the rest were put in his mouth by the writers, or it was just oral history, like legend or
and
myth.
You see myth. That across major religions, these Christ figures, there's so much overlap, and these are beautiful words of wisdom. But whether they tie directly to the literal words that Jesus of Nazareth actually spoke is where this gets foggy.
But for me, though, the crisis was everything I believed came from the Bible. And now the Bible had been taken from me. And now I had to figure out, okay, how do I move forward? Now, some people have different reactions to this kind of a trauma. Some are like, oh, I've been duped. This whole thing's been bullshit. I'm out of here. Bye. I'm now an atheist, whatever.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to try, yoga or mushrooms, or not your kind of mushrooms. Or I'm going to, just try something else. Or the way I decided was, okay, I've grown up in the church. This has been important to me. I feel somehow I don't feel I can reject it all. I don't feel I've been 100% duped, but I got to figure out what's right and what's not. I got to sift through all this and figure it out. It took me 30 friggin' years while I was in the ministry to figure it out. And so fortunately, like I said before, we didn't feel any loyalty to any one denomination or anything like that. So I gravitated towards churches that I felt I could be more exploratory, and that I feel I could travel together with the congregation rather than lead them, and sort of speaking from the pulpit down. It was more, we would find out together kind of a thing. And that worked until it didn't work anymore. In 2010, when I felt the church could no longer handle that kind of pastoral model, and they wanted a real, charismatic leader, strong hierarchical pastor kind of thing. When I was more interested in, let's find out together. And so, yeah, that's how it all began for me. Was you asked what are some of the big things? That's the big one, the inspiration of Scripture.
Yeah.
And then from there, it all sort of like a domino effect. From there, it went on, okay, who's in, who's out? Because everybody seemed to claim to know who was in, who was out. But this doesn't make sense to me anymore. And I felt if we're all, I remember some of those verses that, like, God was in Christ reconciling the whole world to himself, or he is the all in all, and all these kinds of things. The reconciliation of all things. I thought all appears a lot.
Yeah.
Then I thought, okay, and I sort of tended to think that way, that we're all in, but I couldn't figure it out theologically because I'd been so embedded in theology. So that took a long time to figure out as well.
One thing that something you said just brought up for me is something that I thought as a probably middle schooler, maybe high schooler, but it was this, this phrase of unconditional love. And I don't know I don't even think that term appears in the Bible per se, but you do hear it. I heard it at least spoken about a lot from pastors or even teachers as we went to a Christian school, Bible study leaders. God is unconditional love, unconditional love, unconditional love. And I didn't ask these questions out loud, but in my head, I was wondering, like, okay, if God is unconditional love, then how does a place like hell exist for people who have never even heard about Jesus or God? Not necessarily, I wasn't even thinking about people who heard it and said no, but like, what about people in other countries that like literally just don't have the chance? Or, God is unconditional love, but he hates these things. God hates these things, whether it's homosexuality or debauchery or whatever it is. We're so quick as humans to assign, sort of like personifying, just humanizing God as if we know that God hates divorce. That was a big one too. And in my family, I come from a blended family, and it was like so like disruptive to like my high school mind. Like, okay, if God is unconditional love, how does he hate these things or these types of people, these groups of people? How is that the reality? It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I remember I was a country pastor. I had 3 churches, and I was perplexed about this very thing. And I even had a system in play where I was, okay, I'm going to figure this out. So I'm going to start studying Judaism. That's the nearest to Christianity. Then Islam, the 3 major Abrahamic faiths, and then I'm going to go to maybe Hinduism, and then Buddhism, and then Zen, and then maybe Sufism, and etc. I was going to, until I figured this out, how and I was reading Jesus and the Buddha, the different, and in seminary actually, one of my papers, I actually compared some of the sayings of Jesus to some of the sayings of Buddha and how similar they were. And even though, I might have made an A on the paper, it blew my mind how, how similar these
Yeah.
sayings are, just like you said earlier, Chase. So in that whole region, many religions shared many of the same stories and sayings. So, but I remember the day when I realized, wait a minute, love isn't just like a feeling, like, and then, that saying of Jesus where he says, the rain falls on the just and the unjust alike, and the sun shines. And that's to me what love is. It's like rain. It's like love. Like sun. It just shines on everybody. It's indiscriminate. So, like gravity. They might not have known what gravity was back then, but it's like it pulls everybody, and it's indiscriminate. And that to me is what love is. It's not like a sentimental kind of a feeling. It's not like emotional. We get into a little different field when we talk about romantic love or sexual love or whatever. But when it comes to this love we call unconditional love, that's what it's like. Sun, rain, gravity. It's everywhere all the time, indiscriminate. And when I talk that way, or when I draw cartoons about that, it really offends the theological mind, the dogmatic mind, because it thinks it knows who's in and who's out, who does get this love and who doesn't get this love. And then I've been there, done that. I got the T-shirt. I studied Reformed theology. I studied Calvin. I studied all these guys and how they break it down to soteriological love,
Right.
This kind of love and this kind of love and this kind of love, and it's like love is love.
Yeah.
And it's indiscriminate. That's the best word I can come up for it.
Yeah, and you get these tastes of it, and I've been through a process of having thrown the spiritual baby out with the Christian bathwater, and there are these little nuggets, at least in the communities that I grew up in, where you're in worship, which is this portion of the church Sunday service that includes singing, and you get this feeling of spirit that is metaphysical, and it's shared and it's collective with the community. You have underneath this brick and mortar building, you have deep, vulnerable connections with other human beings. You have moments of feeling something beyond yourself that feels as if it's purpose related. And encapsulated in this, it's branded by churchianity, we like to call it. But there are these little chords of real love, and you feel that. And I think that's what keeps us so attached to these communities, is that we've gotten these little slivers of that unconditional feeling. And of course, I've left this framework and have experienced that in a bunch of other domains in my life, and clearly see why Christianity has resonated for so many and been so powerful for so long, is because it facilitates those types of activities that feel very, very real. But then there's this sort of like big leap to adopt everything else that comes with it in that brick and mortar location we call church, all the way from the dogmatic theology to some of these very societal renditions of how to interpret the scriptures in a way that we can use as law and dictate who you can marry or date, or what's a sin and what's not a sin, and whether the formula for you getting to heaven or hell is shaking out to be, in your favor. And that's where I tend to want to depart. But in the separation, oftentimes the deconstruction process, I lost this ability to see some of those really important attributes of what the religion and the community of the religion offered. Do you see in your work, and have you connected with folks who are spiritually thirsty, even after this departure or deconstruction process? Because that's where I see so much of an open arm from you, the Naked Pastor, to say, hey, there's still some really incredible modalities for experiencing God or the divine, or however you want to articulate that, while also leaving behind the dogma. And so maybe if you could go into a little bit, speaking to the person who's left, but still feels or might feel a void of spirituality might be looking for more of a access to unconditional love or God, and how do you work with people in that space?
One of the things I'm very adamant about is that I don't publish my statement of faith, for example. I don't even have one. But if I did, I wouldn't publish it, because what happens when you do that is people say, oh, I like his, what he believes, I'm going to follow him. Because I've actually had people sit across from me in my pastor study and say, we pay you to tell us what to believe.
Oh man.
And that's what a lot of people want, right?
We're so groomed to outsource thinking.
It keeps you in the child archetype when you're looking to someone else to tell you what to believe.
Exactly. So I refuse. What I want people to do is to become spiritually independent. That is, they become the masters of their own destiny, the captains of their own ship, that they take the steering wheel of their own lives and decide how to be spiritual. That's our right. That's our responsibility.
I love that.
To decide how to be spiritual. And if for you it means becoming an ethical atheist or whatever, or if you want to become an evangelical pastor, I don't know if even that's even suggested anymore. Evangelicalism is in real trouble. But if you wanted to become a pastor or whatever, I'm here to help you get from your point A to your point B, not your point A to my point B.
Right.
So I want you to grow in your own way. Just like our three kids, they're very, very different. Three different adults, but they are the masters of their own destiny. They're the captains of their own ship. They drive their own spiritual lives and decide how to be spiritual. And even though it might be very different from us and from each other, and some others might think it's weird or, different or unusual or whatever, it doesn't matter to them, because they've chosen things that help them grow and mature as human beings. It's like a buffet. When you go into the buffet, we used to put the food on their plate, and then, then we let them choose, and then we'd add vegetables. And then eventually, fuck it. We just let them choose what to eat, because they know it's best.
Yeah.
And so it's the same spiritually. People, if they're given the autonomy and the authority over their own lives, they will choose what's best for them and figure out what works and what doesn't work. And the difficulty comes, though, like you've sort of intimated a couple of times, is that when we do decide to do that, we can no longer feel really comfortable in most churches, and we end up having to leave. And my observation, and I think my experience too, is the biggest pain point of leaving the church is loneliness, like that loss of community. And I remember when I left the church, like we'd been in it our whole lives, and all of a sudden it wasn't there anymore. And it wasn't just Sunday service, it was the whole support, everything.
Yeah.
No other group, I don't think, offers the same thing when you walk in and you decide you're going to be a part, that you're handed friends on a platter. I mean, you've got friends, you've got babysitters, you've got activities every night of the week, you've got potluck suppers, you've got donuts and coffee for Sunday morning, you've got mechanics, you've got people to help you move, you've got pickup trucks, you've got, you name it, everybody's there. It's like a ghetto of support.
Yeah.
And but that's the problem.
Yeah.
And so when I left the church, I tried different things, and I realized, you know what, nothing comes close. Nothing comes close. And then that's when I started thinking, because I was also studying on cults and everything at the same time, and I realized, maybe that's the trade-off, is that deep, intense intimacy comes with some control and what I call spiritual blackmail, where they know too much about you.
Right.
And so now I encourage people, don't look for something to replace the church. There's other things out there, and maybe analyze, maybe that spiritual abuse I submitted to and was sort of participated in in my own, I was kind of complicit in my own abuse. Maybe it was because that's what it took to stay. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's a lot to unpack there. I know.
Yeah.
Lisa and I had to start from scratch and make friends from scratch. And we were never taught how to do that as adults.
Yeah.
And because they were given to you automatically. So
it's a skill set.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. It's interesting that you brought up cults and studying cults. I think you said cults, not occult, right? Or maybe it was both.
Cults.
Yeah. Okay. Because it's like a love language for Chase and I to find a good cult documentary and watch it. It's just like fascinating to us.
Isn't it?
But and there's so many, obviously. And some of them are far worse than others, of course. But it's so interesting when, something will come up, people will be sharing about their experience or why they came, and then how the teaching sort of morphed into something that didn't feel right. But then their whole community was here, their whole life was here, so they stayed. There was a big risk of the question, like asking questions had a big price tag attached to it, which was losing your community. And I think, to your point, I think it keeps people in much longer than if that community wasn't there. And there's so many times where we're listening to a cult documentary. It doesn't matter what the thing is, what the cult is. We look at each other and we're like, that sounds really familiar to something that we learned in 7th grade Bible class or, Sunday school. And I'm not saying it is a cult. I'm saying that there are similarities that when you step out and you're looking with fresh eyes and you're really asking questions and you're not afraid to ask questions. I'm not afraid to ask any question now, looking at my upbringing. When you step out fully, you start to see the similarities between dogmatic religion and these cults that people sort of make fun of, like, oh, you were in a cult. It's like, sometimes I want to say, like, yeah, it kind of feels like I was in a cult a little bit. And I'm not, I really don't want to offend people. This is my experience after coming out and asking questions about it and seeing the similarities. This is just my process. I really don't want to offend people who find value in the church and they found a place that they really love. That is not the point of this conversation. The point of this conversation is to support the people who are in a deconstructive phase and who are asking questions, because like you said, it's really scary and lonely, and it can be terrifying for people to completely uproot their life.
Right.
And that's one, I don't even know if, I think cults are certainly doing something right, because they foster these feelings of some of the most peak and profound human experiences under the domain of this community. And obviously there's a big difference between culture and cult. And that's kind of the nuance of where you get into a cult. As it funnels down, it gets a little more, a little less life affirming and more isolated on one individual or one set of individuals. But there are certain attributes that are like literally critical to the human experience as it pertains to experiencing love and fulfillment and satiation. And the way that I look at this often is religion and these sections of epistemology are not unlike how, we're big fitness and wellness individuals. And we look at all of these different, let's say, exercise protocols, and you've got CrossFitters and, cardiovascular, long distance trainers, and and you've got people who do yoga, and then you've got weightlifters and athletes. There's this diverse array of physical endeavors that various individuals pursue in order to experience health. Mm-hmm. And there are many ways to experience health. And one might say that CrossFit is the best way, and others might say that, long distance cardio or weightlifting or bodybuilding is the way that they experience health. Great. I'm kind of here for all the flavors of the ice cream. But I'm less interested if someone is telling me, no. The only way to experience health is by doing CrossFit. Right. And that's where, I tend to draw the line. But shifting this conversation a little bit into, because we could nitpick for hours on some of the contradictions and some of the challenges. And where I'm really, really interested is some of the programming and some of the patterns that were built in so many of us who grew up in this community, in this environment, don't go away easily. and they are often subconscious patterns that are played out in our life events. And it only takes something like your artwork that just radically communicates an idea that you had no idea was actually playing out in your life, or how you can see those patterns playing out in the lives of others, other decision makers in your life, communities that you're a part of. And so I'd love to get into talking about what you see as some of the major patterns for individuals who grew up religious that show up in their life, whether they're still attached to the religion or not. For instance, we talk often about purity culture and the shame and guilt associated with sex, sexuality, relationships,
modesty.
Would love to get your perspective on what you would say to someone who is, let's say they're out of their religion. They're still not, underneath the top to bottom, left to right orientation of Christianity that says no sex before marriage. You got to stay with your husband no matter what happens. Divorce is a sin, but they still feel a tremendous amount of guilt and shame as it pertains to their sexual life.
So have you guys seen any of my Sexy Sunday cartoons?
Everyone. Yeah, we're always like, oh my God, look at this. Yeah. Oh yeah, we love it.
I have so much fun with those. I'm going to make a book.
Yes.
And I would love to title it "Fuck Purity Culture," but I don't know if it would get published. So, but that would be a great title. And I have something like 69, no joke, cartoons on purity culture so far. But I'd like to get around 100 and, I don't know, 30 or 40 or something, and then all my posts about it and everything. But that's definitely one thing. I mean, we can all share our own personal, what's been the stickiest kind of theology that's, we can't seem to get rid of. My big one isn't purity culture. For some reason, even though I grew up in a very kind of purity culture setting, when I met Lisa, I don't know, something happened where I think
it was just the fact that you're probably a healthy young male at the time, and
but why? I mean, there was issues around masturbation and all that kind of thing, but Lisa and I just felt really free. I mean, we didn't really consummate until our wedding night, but we had a lot of fun getting there. So I don't know how we managed that, but we did, and we just had a lot of fun.
That's kind of how we were as well. We didn't wait till our wedding night, but it was like, okay, sex isn't allowed, but everything up until penetration is allowed. And Chase's dad even told him when you were in high school, he was like, you know what, son? Fooling around is a gift from God for people who are waiting, for marriage, basically. So he basically gave you the go ahead, like, have fun.
Yeah. So that's great. I never got that. No. But I'll tell you what my big one is. I still am, I guess, very intense about spirituality, very interested in it. And then I had a very profound experience when I was very young in the ministry, where I realized how shallow I was as spiritually. And I went down this rabbit hole of mysticism. And it started with Henry Nouwen, and then it went to Thomas Merton. And these are like Roman Catholic kind of mystics. And then it went to, Gandhi and Zen Buddhism and blah, 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 that whole thing, meditation and all. And I sort of took this, Lisa calls it my Gandhi phase, where I decided that poverty was the best way to live the life of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's the health wealth gospel. For those who don't know, it's God wants you to be healthy and wealthy.
Yep.
And then there's the other one where you need to be like Jesus, who didn't even have a place to lay his head at night. like, you know, that kind of poverty. And I chose that one. And I developed really unhealthy beliefs around money, success, you know, selling my art, you know, promoting anything I did.
Yeah.
You know, all this kind of thing was like, went against my core beliefs. It was painful, very, very painful. And that's one thing that's very, very sticky. It was so sticky for me that I actually wrote a book, Money is Spiritual.
Saw that.
And to me, that was me trying to exercise my demons. And it really, really did help. I still got a ways to go where I'm afraid of making too much money, or afraid of being too successful, or being afraid of being too well known, or being popular, or anything like this. And, you know, driving a nice car, living in a nice house, going on vacation, enjoying a nice bottle of wine or a single malt scotch, you know what I mean? Like a expensive cigar, whatever. These things to me I feel like I'm trespassing, you know? And denying Christ somehow. I mean, I don't think in those theological terms anymore. And here was my strategy. I actually decided, it was almost like this: God, if you're real, you're going to have to forgive me for the next few years, because in advance, I'm asking for advance forgiveness, because I'm going to become ambitious. I'm going to try to sell my art. I'm going to try and make money. I'm going to try and, you know, pay off debt. I'm going to try to enjoy my life and enjoy nice things. So it was almost like I had to sort of make a deal that I was going to sin knowingly and somehow break this limiting belief that I had in my head around all that stuff. And so that was my big deal. And it's still a big deal for me, because when I say I'm, you know, selling some art or promoting my book or whatever, inevitably somebody's going to come up and say, Jesus wouldn't sell his art, you know, or whatever.
Right.
And you know, that's my Achilles heel.
So what was the story that you were telling yourself about being successful? If I become successful, if I make money, what does that say about me? What was that story?
Yeah, so it was, do you guys know John Michael Talbot? Do you remember him?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
He was a evangelical Christian who became a monk, and, you know, and he sang a song, Lady Poverty, where he invited Lady Poverty into his life. And I used to sing that song because I was a musician as well. And so for me it was just being unchristlike. That's what the story I was telling myself. Now I've moved on way beyond that now, but at the time, that's what my struggle was that, you know, yeah, my theology was pretty morbid, and you know, to die daily and live on the cross, and, you know, deny myself, and all that kind of thing, which is very popular. A lot of people struggle with that, and I know it, because when I try to do anything in terms of selling or marketing or promoting or, you know, money or anything like that, I get a lot of kickback. So it's pretty interesting. That was my sticky one. Now my Sexy Sundays with purity culture, man, the stories that people are posting in the comments are heartbreaking. Where, you know, a beautiful couple, they love each other, but they can't enjoy sex, and it's just tragic, you know. So I'm hoping that these will chisel away at all that kind of negative theology. What about you guys? What was sticky for you guys? Just out of curiosity.
For me, I'll speak for myself. I think Chase would join me in this, but for me, definitely sex and sexuality. My relationship to my body, how I, you know, saw my body, spoke to myself, the pressure on specifically women in the church upbringing to be modest to we have this. I know the pressure of purity culture reaches men too in different ways, but women specifically, I was told many times in my life, you need to be careful to not dress a certain way to cause your brothers in Christ to stumble. Modesty, humility. We went to a Christian school, obviously. There was always a dress code. There was so much emphasis on the external, making sure that your external didn't say something about you or your intentions or your worth. And then because there was so much heaviness and lack of education around sex and sexuality, I had zero sex education because our school basically just wanted us to bypass it and just pretend that it didn't exist. And so, thankfully, I had a boyfriend in Chase where we were learning together and we felt safe with each other. And it was beautiful, just a discovery of ourselves and each other. But then there was always shame and guilt applied afterwards. And, the fear of getting pregnant, the fear of getting an STD, and that, God will not bless your marriage if you have sex before marriage. And, all these things that were told to me point blank. There was so much pressure to be a certain way as a young woman. And then moving into when we were married, this thing that had so much taboo around it, all of a sudden I have a ring on my finger and now everything is allowed. I don't even know myself. I don't even know what I like or what I don't like because I haven't had the ability or the encouragement to explore in a healthy way. And so being able to communicate sexual needs or desires or whatever is just a foreign language. It doesn't even exist. And that's what I hear a lot from young women who may be younger than me or my age growing up in purity culture is like, there is so much sexual fuckery to untangle, especially for women. Because there is this added extra pressure on modesty and things like that. And it really cut me off from myself and the expression of sensuality, even with Chase when we were married, is like, it's not just a flip of a switch in your brain. It's not just these programs and patterns and ways of believing, what reality is. They go so deep into your psyche that just having a ring on your finger doesn't magically make everything wonderful in the sexual realm once you're married. So that was definitely a very sticky point for me.
Yeah. No, really, really similar for me. And there's a couple, but around the purity culture realm is that I went to Christian school and everything, but I was not like a church kid in the sense that I was like praying and reading the Bible. It was just a part of the community, and I was just a jock, and it kind of went through the motions, and it was working for me, so I didn't challenge it. But I did feel the pressure of being good, and as a Christian school, being in ASB and all these other things, like my image was really, really important to protect, and my Christian image of being this good kid, makes good decisions, and so the fear of getting caught. Because we were sexually active in high school and as teenagers and into our early 20s was a weight on my back that a kid should not have to feel. And then anybody who's been in a committed relationship knows young, novel sexual experiences are radically different than committed relationship sexual experiences or marriage sex. Very different flavors of sex. And so we built we dated for 7 years before we got married. And we built a sexual relationship of taboo because we'd had to sneak out, not tell anybody. Well, that is just a very interesting thing to integrate now into a sexual dynamic. And so weirdly enough, we had to be like risque when we were in our 20s and getting married in order to have the kind of sexual experience that both of us were looking for.
Otherwise, it just kind of felt like robotic.
We weren't able to be like, hey, I have curiosity around sex, and here are some of the things that I'd be interested in, and I'm in love with your body, and I want to hear about what feels good for you. And having healthy conversations around sex was awkward and it was clunky. And so we couldn't have like non-sneaky sex even when we were married. And I'd be lying if I said it didn't contribute to the fact that we got divorced. So that's one for me is just piggybacking off the purity culture aspect. And then two is onto that identity piece. It is so critically important about what other people think of you. And, I was a successful athlete in this Christian community. I was a good student, good looking kid, and my family was of importance for whatever that means in that community. And so I felt a big pressure to be successful, and that's still with me today. And what I do in the world, how successful I am in the world, I'm constantly dealing with this feeling of I'm not enough yet, and that I haven't succeeded enough yet. And that the only way for me to have some level of reconciliation with the amount of things that I haven't done yet to be enough is to flog myself because I'm a sinner. And I realize that I've broken away from that theology, but that's what was programmed, is that, hey guys, you're all innately bad, you're innately sinful, but if you flog yourself enough and you ask for forgiveness enough, you can start the day anew back at zero. You'll never get back, you'll never get to where you want to be. But as long as you just keep asking and keep saying, I'm fucked up and I'm sorry, that you'll be fine and you'll get to heaven someday. And so that programming it's still in my nervous system, and it takes a spiritual practice for me. And that's one of the reasons why I ultimately came back to a spiritual life and have found such beauty in mysticism and more esoteric versions of Christianity, is because there's this idea that we may actually just be originally neutral, not originally sinful, maybe originally blessed even, right? Because we have this potential to blossom into something more abundant and leave this world from a place of more love than we came into it with. And so that's where I get inspiration, but it still takes a practice to be able to override that feeling of haven't done enough yet. God, I need to flog myself because I'm still not living up to the expectations that are put upon me. And so those two attributes, kind of the purity culture and the original sin idea, have really, they just sink into your nervous system and they play out in your life events, and you go, damn it, I left the religion 10 years ago and I'm still living out those patterns.
Yeah, I compare it to like a brain tumor that has tentacles all through the brain and it's inoperable. And you just hope that radiation will, make it shrink.
Yeah.
I compare it to that, where, some people callously say, it's not real. You stop believing in Santa Claus and next year it was fine. Like, get over it. But it's not the same, because our religion, like you say, just sunk into every aspect of our lives, right down to what you did before you ate, and, who you could be friends with, and how much money you could make, and how much money you had to give, and what you did on the weekends, and, who you can marry.
Right.
You need to have kids, all in every little aspect of our lives. It's like being, programmed, like you say, or brainwashed, and it takes a lot of effort, maybe even a lifetime. Like I imagine I'll probably struggle till my dying day with wanting to maybe sell my art and ask for more money and feeling guilty about that. So it's that's just something, but I'm aware of it, and I'm doing the work. I'm putting the work in to heal myself of that stuff. But yeah, so I always suggest therapy. Get a good coach. Talk, communicate. Read books. Go to conferences. Do whatever you can to heal yourself, because it is up to you.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did, and it really did help. But it takes work.
Well, I will give you the feedback that you deserve it, my friend, because you are doing just incredible work. And it literally a piece of art from you can change an entire day and then change an entire mindset. For me, it could change literally a 24-hour period of the way that I look at something. And wow. To be in that space of abundance, right? I think it's the coined phrase in spirituality that gets thrown out probably way too often. But with those those levels of abundance. And let's say your art and your upcoming book on fuck purity culture makes you millions and millions and millions of dollars. There will be this new level of impact that will be available to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I see as really, really exciting about working through even that story that you've told yourself, is that there is a new version, there's a new lens to be able to impact. And again, this isn't some scorekeeping activity. If you want to spend it all and go vacationing, you definitely should. When you take stumbling blocks and turn them into stepping stones, you're given another vertical. You're giving yourself an opportunity to live out your life from just a different frame. And so that's what excites me about, not only sharing some of the things that are challenging to me and what I still find inspiration in working through those with, but also, for you, is that there is just a new vertical to see opportunity through when leaning into those things that seem challenging.
Well, that's the thing is, I want to help more people. Like, I really do want to help more people. It's not that I just want more people to buy my art. I want more people to see my cartoons, see my work, because I do hear stories like that from people every day, that a cartoon or something totally, broke their heart or made them cry or made them feel loved or seen or whatever. So that really is behind it all, is I want to help people. But but the mind can really, mind fucks are mind fucks, and they call them that for a reason.
No doubt.
Speaking of your art, I shared one of your cartoons on my story a couple days ago, and we mentioned in our stories, like, hey, we're really excited to be interviewing the Naked Pastor. If you guys aren't following him yet, definitely look into his page. And most of the time, everyone is like, oh, he's so great. I love this. But for the first time a couple of days ago, I got someone respond to my story, a woman who I don't think read your caption. I don't think she looked at your page. I think she just saw my story post. It was the one with the big peach. It was like the couple that was engaging in a sexy Sunday, and you covered it up. There was a big peach there, but there was like this image of like this proverbial church sort of presence behind them saying like, hey, God is very jealous that you're not thinking about him, or something along those lines. And it was hilarious. And I didn't think twice about putting it on my story. And she didn't read the caption. I assume, because you explain exactly in there like where this is coming from in a very beautiful way. It wasn't in a confrontational way at all. And she had said something like, so it seems to me that he's making a mockery of God and the church. Is that right? And I could hear the bit of, it wasn't like, so what's going on here? It was like, so, that's what it kind of sounded like. What would how do you respond to people? I'm sure you get all sorts of comments on the full spectrum of comments, I'm sure, but what do you say to people who claim that you're making a mockery of God and the church?
I'm in this weird margin where I'm not in the church, but I'm not fully out either, sort of thing. I'm not in the system church, but I'm on the margins somehow. I'm still playing the game. I'm not wearing the uniform. I'm not following the rules. I don't have a coach, but I'm still in the game, and I'm annoying a lot of people, but I'm also, helping a lot of people. And I care about the church. There, I said it. The church is here to stay. I don't believe in banning religion or, banning the church. Not going to work, and it's not going to happen. We know the church has this incredible ability to survive, and if it gets persecuted, it goes underground and spreads. It just has this weird capability, and so my only contention is, can we just please do it in a healthy manner? Like, if we're going to do it, let's do it in a healthy manner.
Yeah.
And so what I'm doing is I'm criticizing anything that prohibits or limits our personal freedom to be our authentic selves. I feel that's our right as human beings, is to become to have the freedom to become our most authentic self. And the church often prevents that from happening, prohibits it from happening. And one of the areas is sexually, right? And there's, because I did grow up being taught that you had to think about God every second of the day. And if you didn't, then, there's hell right over there. You better be careful. And so that's what that cartoon came out of, was there are a lot of people who can't just enjoy one another's bodies because somehow it's carnal and worldly and secular and therefore unholy, and that God's upset and disappointed and jealous, because you're not thinking about him 24/7. And so that's what I'm challenging, is that kind of idea. For me, like Lisa and I have been studying tantrism, tantric sex and all that. And it's not about the sex, it's about being present. It's just about being present, including when you're having sex. It's just about being present, and your mind's not somewhere else. You're enjoying your body, you're enjoying their body, you're enjoying the moment. And there's no goal. There's no ambition. There's just enjoyment in the present moment. And that's how we should live life, including our sex lives. And so that's, a lot of people can't just enjoy the moment because their mind immediately goes, I wonder what God's thinking right now. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm challenging. I think that's our right, and it's our privilege and our responsibility to figure out how to be our most authentic selves and how to be present in the moment right now, here in our bodies. And I think that's sacred.
Yeah. I love that.
That's beautiful. One of the things that we've been doing of late, and it was not a part of our upbringing, it was not a part of most of our relationship, but we've leaned into art as a spiritual practice, and we've been painting. And cool. Our great friend and teacher Paul Check has introduced us to art therapy, and it's just become a beautiful practice for us, and have so many.
Did you say mandala?
Mandala, yeah.
Mandala. Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
Yeah. And it's been just an incredible way to connect with ourselves through at a higher level, and experience presence, like you're articulating. What for you has art been, and what do you see it being for others in it as it adds to a life of abundance and fulfillment and presence?
For me, everybody's creative. I don't think anybody can say I'm not creative. Everybody's creative in some way, from maybe the way they dress or the way they talk or the way they think to things they make, like from a cake to a huge canvas or a sculpture or music or a poem or whatever. Everybody is creative. So for me, creativity is enjoying that freedom to be your authentic self and to express that in some way, and to find a piece of paper or a piece of canvas and paint or whatever and just throw it down, like just experiment. I mean, I remember some years ago, I felt like I was in a rut creatively. I'm really good at watercolor. I can paint watercolors, no problem. And I was painting watercolor landscapes. And after a while, I'm thinking, I've always been intimidated by abstract painting, and thought, I'm going to try abstract painting. And I was scared. And so I bought canvases. I got a big spreadsheet, like a big, canvas sheet to lay down on the floor. And I just got a bunch of paint, and I just started flinging and throwing and spraying and scratching and scraping. And I came up with some abstract paintings that I actually like. And it broke something in me. It broke a fear and it broke a barrier, and it actually produced some art, So I just encourage people. And so what that did for me was, it didn't just produce art. It taught me that a lot of my limitations are right here. Mm-hmm. So figure out a way to do it. I mean, get a broomstick in a box and start beating the box up. Do something, anything, just to express yourself. And you might be surprised how it breaks something. Since something new might be born in you, a new level, a new season, a new, phase, a new insight. And so that for me is what art is about, not just looking at it, but making it. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, totally feel that. It's definitely been really enjoyable. And it's just, when we first started, the first mandala that we painted at a workshop together, you're so critical of every line and every paint splotch or whatever, and you're just like, oh, it's not supposed to look like that. At least for me, like I have
Right.
sort of like, I love the details. I love tiny little details, like the skinniest brush possible. I want those details.
Right.
And if it's not coming out the way that I want, I sometimes can get hard on myself. Like, no, this isn't, I'm supposed to be able to take a picture of this and like show people and be proud of it. But there is also, I would say, the larger piece of me that just wants to play and just wants to like express, my inner child and just play without judgment. And it's been a lesson for me. The art is the medium by which I'm learning the lesson, but the lesson is to let my inner child play and not to judge myself so harshly over something that doesn't actually matter. And it's so wonderful when you are open to the lessons that something like painting or creativity or drawing or whatever music has for you, if we're paying attention to them.
Oh, there's so many lessons. I mean, it has taught me so much about my addiction to the right now. I need things done now. I need to be able to get them done now. I need a completed project with an ETA. I need it from you. I'm going to give it to you. That's the way that my world has worked. And with art and with having a piece that we're working on all the time, it's so beautiful to watch what time does to that end result of the art piece. Because if I consolidated that into a 3-hour window where I'm, on a canvas painting, the outcome is going to look significantly different than if I take a week on it. Why? Because I have it in the house, over the course of the day, and it's, maybe 25% done. And I see something that I might want to add to it just because of the angle of where it's at or the energy that's coming off of it in our home. Or I might sleep on something, and how the intuition works and the subconscious works is that it'll just give you a little nugget every now and then without even trying to pull from your brain at all. And you're like, oh my God, I want to add that to the art piece. And this idea, this fraudulent idea that everything has to be done immediately and that you need to get a deliverable out. Of course, that's 10 years in a corporate environment for me, has been such, you can tell me something and someone could have told me that 4 years ago, like not everything has to be done immediately. And I'm like, yeah, cool. Got it. No, makes sense. But until you actually feel that, until you have that experiential gnosis, it's like, oh, I get it now. I get it because it actually is felt inside of my body. And the end result would not have been even near what it was and how powerful it is had I consolidated that into a timeline that had an ETA or a ETC, I think is the phrase associated with it. And so, God, it's such a fun modality. Of course, observing art is as powerful. And you throw humor in there, which I say this often, but especially as it pertains to your art mixed with humor, so often we're afraid to look at things in our own life and our own past because we think it'll make us cry. But how often, with the right medicine, the right modality, we'll end up healing through laughing when we thought we would have to heal through crying. And that's something that I just love about the way that you deliver your art, is that there is a flair of hilariousness to it. And sometimes I just have so much gratitude and respect for the work that you do, my friend.
Thanks, man. Yeah, no, that whole thing about spontaneity is so important. Like when I sit down I stand when I paint, but when I stand to start a new watercolor, I don't have a plan. I mean, sometimes I have commissions where they want a certain kind of thing, but most of the time when I start a watercolor, I don't have a plan. I don't know what I'm going to paint. So it's all I have all the paint there, the water's there, the brushes are there, the paper's there, but I just like, okay, here we go. Prussian blue, you know, and then I just go for it.
Mm.
That's the way it was with the abstracts, you know. So same with my whole Sophia series. I wrote a book, The Liberation of Sophia. There's 59 drawings of Sophia in there. And every one of them wasn't planned, but it was a cathartic experience for me every week while my wife was working shift work at night to draw these Sophia images without a plan. I just sat down with my pen and pencil and eraser and started drawing. And it healed me. It took a couple of years of drawing those, but it was healing and cathartic in a very real way. So I know for a fact that art can heal, not just looking at it, but making it. And don't judge it. It's your baby, so you don't judge your baby, and just enjoy it, you know. Even if nobody else sees it. I recommend a book too. This is one of my top 10 now. Rick Rubin has a new book out called The Creative Act, a Way of Being. It's so good. It's just so good. So I would recommend that to people who are struggling with creativity.
Great recommendation.
Definitely. We'll put that in the show notes. We just appreciate this conversation so much for ourselves, obviously, but also for the many listeners I know who are in a state of mid deconstruction or just starting to, or maybe this conversation invites them into asking more questions. As we come to a close here, if there was a billboard that every person on earth would see who maybe was in this deconstructive phase, what would you tell that person as a note of encouragement?
You're already there. That's what I tell people. You're struggling now. You're confused. You're anxious. You're afraid. And it's a real mindfuck when you don't believe in hell anymore, but you're afraid you might go there because you don't believe in it. And you know, people are struggling with all this kind of confusing stuff going on, and loneliness and leaving the church and all that. And a lot of people deconstructing still have that religious impulse that they've got to do the right thing in order to get to the goal of perfection or righteousness or whatever it is. One day, though, you're going to realize you're okay. You're okay. And you've always been okay. You're already there. You're going to get there and realize I've been here the whole time. And, you know, I hope that helps some people feel a little bit of relief of the tension of the feeling the need of becoming something or getting somewhere. You're already there. You're already perfect. And I think that's what deconstruction is getting. It's deconstruction. It's removing things, getting things out of the way so that it's just you left without all the baggage. And you're already there, though. You just don't see it yet.
Yeah,
beautiful.
That's beautiful. Love that.
Thank you so much, my friend. It's been so great to connect with you, and especially after the years of consuming your incredible content and your artwork. Where can people find you? What are you working on so that people can stay connected with you and look for upcoming books or works that you have? Yeah,
well, it's great meeting you guys and hanging out. I think we'd be great friends. So,
yes.
And maybe we are.
We already are.
Yeah, we already are. Well, if you search for Naked Pastor, you'll find me. But make sure it's one word. If you Google Naked Pastor, you're gonna.
It's a kink for somebody out there.
Yeah. You're gonna see, you know, that
different types of artwork.
But that's not me. So Naked Pastor, one word, and nakedpastor.com. That's home base for me, and I'm on every social media platform you can think of. And I'm really good at responding to direct messages and emails and everything. I respond to all those. And so if you want to reach out, give it a shot and I'll respond, I promise. So yeah, it's been great talking with you guys and it's been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. I know this conversation resonated with our listeners. Thank you so much for being here and hanging out with us, you guys. Check out The Naked Pastor, one word. Of course, we will have all the links in the show notes for you. Follow him on Instagram. Get more laughs into your life. Share his stuff. It's amazing. And it's added so much joy to our life. We will talk to you next time. Go spread some light. Okay, bye.
Thank you so much for listening.
If you enjoyed that, check out right over here for some more fun clips.
Oh, and you're going to want to subscribe.
Bye.